students, welcome to Civil Services Prime Time by CivicCentre IAS. So let's try to understand what were the recent issues for the last 1 week, especially when it comes to international relations affairs. So we have taken 6 articles, and most important among this would be the new Sevilla Forum on debt, especially the sovereign debt taken by different countries, how to repay them, and what are the different conditions that were evolving over a period of time. That would be the most important topic for this session. So let's try to understand what are these 6 topics. The first one is China files WTO complaint against India. So each and every time at a WTO dispute settlement body, one or another country is against on another countries. Let's suppose sometimes Brazil, sometimes Australia, sometimes New Zealand. These are sometimes complaining against whether China or India. So this time China files WTO complaint against India on what? So that's we will see in the detailed discussion. Second one, India MERCOSUR Trade Pact. Just like how we have been keeping the different types of PTAs, preferential trade agreements, free trade agreements. In a similar way, there is a South American bloc, MERCOSUR. So with that, India has on a trade pact. That is the second one. Third one, future prospects of India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. So why this was particularly seen in news? Because of ongoing conflicts in West Asian region. That is one of the biggest worry for the continuation of this project. Whether this project will be viable or not, that no one knows. So that is the third one. UNESCO Global Education Report, that is the from United Nations Economic and Social Council organization, which has released a global education report, and they have discussed some of the important issues, especially women and girl child education. What were the different initiatives that were taken up by Government of India for the girl child education and promote equity and equality among the students? That is the fourth one. Fifth one, Global Forest Resources Assessment 2025. So there is another assessment report, especially what were the global forest areas. From the India perspective, what were the different initiatives taken by Government of India for the promotion of forest resources? And the last one would be the new Sevilla Forum on debt. So mostly either individual persons or companies or even governments, they will take loans from another countries also. So the based on the loans repayment and the political conditions and economic implications, sometimes the ratings on these countries will be very much disturbed. So that's why at UNCTAD, UNCTAD, popularly known as UNCTAD, has come up with a new forum which will completely discussing about debt reforms, especially sovereign debt reforms. So let's try to understand what is the China's issue with regard to India at WTO. So China lodged a formal complaint with the World Trade Organization, alleging that India's subsidies for electric vehicles. So if you look at India's electric vehicle segment, mostly under FAME 1 scheme, under FAME 2 scheme, and productive linked incentive scheme, the Government of India is providing different types of subsidies. So these subsidies are distorting the Chinese exports in the domestic markets of India. So that was the major concern for China. That is the issue also. And batteries under the schemes FAME 1, FAME 2, SMEC violate multilateral trade rules, providing an unfair edge to domestic manufacturers and threatening China's export interests. So far, what we know when it comes to international relations are goods. So Chinese goods are mostly cheaper. They are dumping into the different type of economies. But let's suppose if Government of India is providing subsidies in a such a way that the imported goods are more costlier and locally manufactured goods are very cheap in nature, then obviously the Chinese exports will take a hit. That is the biggest issue. So what are the key allegations by China? So China's complaint lodged under WTO dispute settlement understanding. So there is a dedicated body called dispute settlement body, which will look after your disputes. But because of Donald Trump, this dispute settlement body has also halted its operation. Violation of national treatment. What is national treatment under WTO? So whatever the products that you are manufactured in your home country, the same products, whatever you are importing from another nation, that should be treated as much as your own produced goods. That is the national treatment. So under the allegations, subsidies discriminate against foreign goods by favoring local production. How these local productions are discriminating? Because of subsidies, government is providing huge subsidies. That is the biggest allegation. Next one, prohibited import substitution subsidies. Incentives tied to using Indian components over imports distorted. So under the SCM agreement article, whatever the incentives if you are receiving, obviously they are tied to using Indian components only rather than any foreign goods. Mostly the incentives were tied to only Indian components. That is the import substitution subsidies prohibited class. Unfair advantage. India's subsidies 46% of electric vehicle cost. Let's suppose if you produce one electric vehicle, let's say 1 lakh rupees. So almost 46,000 rupees were provided under subsidies. So which is exceeding global norms, only 10 to 26% in other economies. So in another economies, only 10 to 26% of total value of production has been given under the subsidies. But when it comes to India, it has been breached 46%. Obviously, it will impact China's legitimate interest. So no one knows what are their legitimate interest, but WTO they have claimed it. So what is the strategic and geopolitical context between these India and China dispute under the WTO? India-China relations post Galvan 2020, most of us know, ties remain strained. So ties were not so smooth. This escalates economic friction among border talks whenever any disputes arises between two different nations. So mostly they will under the crush of whether economic or political. So if you take an example of India-Pakistan and India-China, so most of the border disputes or border clashes sometimes merge with economic fractions of these trade systems. It tests the strategic autonomy in India's multi-alignment. Examples, Quad's supply chain initiative. So after COVID-19, what most of the countries had thought that why can't we depend upon another nation apart from your China? Supply Chains Resilience Initiative, Supply Chains Resilience Initiative, SCRI, or China plus one strategy. So you should not depend upon China for each and every goods. Rather than you can diversify your supply chains. In a similar way, India's multi-alignment with different nations or different trade blocs, that is Quad, informal grouping. Next one, global supply chains, which underscores the China's one plus strategy with India attracting Tesla, Foxconn investments. So if you recently seen post COVID-19, most of the investments, whatever they have been left from China, they have visited India. Not only India, Vietnam, Bangladesh, based on the comparative cost advantage of production. So the supply chains resilience when it comes to global supply, the China plus one strategy which will be undermined or underscored because of this WTO disputes. Rare earth restrictions by China 2025 amplify much more vulnerabilities. So there are some rare earth elements which has abundance in China. From Chinese to rest of the world, the export measures were taken. So when these export measures were taken, obviously it will have effect on your electric vehicle segments, clean energy technologies. So your day-to-day gadgets, whatever the day-to-day gadgets, the rare earth elements are key components under this segment, right? So obviously, which will further amplify the vulnerabilities under the rare earth elements. When it comes to environment, each delays could hinder India's NDC commitments, which is 500 gigawatts of non-fossil fuel capacity by 2030. But WTO scrutiny may encourage transparent green subsidies. But under the WTO scrutiny, they can encourage transparent green subsidies, so which will have a positive impact on our environment. Then they will allow, they will encourage transparent subsidies. Next one, MERCOSUR grouping. Why it was seen means because recently India and Brazil from MERCOSUR group has issued a joint declaration to expand the India-MERCOSUR Trade Pact, aiming to enhance bilateral trade, nation-to-nation trade, investment between two nations, and economic partnership and economic policies between two nations. So let's try to understand what is this MERCOSUR bloc. It is a southern common market because there are a group of countries which come together and they have formed a group that is called MERCOSUR group. Regional economic integration bloc in South America. So sometimes these groupings are important for your prelims point of view. So what are the major objectives under MERCOSUR group? Free movement of goods, services, capital and people. Common trade and economic policies. So the trade practices among these groupings are very common in nature, and the economic policies of the countries, especially in these groupings, are also similar. A larger integrated market for member states to compete globally. So it is a one group where the countries presenting in MERCOSUR group will have a competitive edge on another grouping. If you have more number of countries on your hand and you have free movement of goods, services, capital and people, and more likely better economic policies, then you have a fair advantage when it comes to any negotiations with the regional countries, another regional blocks. That is the third one. Its official languages are Spanish and Portuguese because of their influence in history, and its headquarters are located in Montevideo, Uruguay. So these are important from your prelims point of view. So what is this MERCOSUR, South American Trading Bloc, modeled on the European Union, just like how our European Union was modeled. In a similar way, MERCOSUR group was also there to promote regional economic integration. So what was the purpose of this grouping? For the regional economic integration in this area, which was established in 1990 by Treaty of Association, in institutional by Protocol of the Rio Preto. So these were very important, and which has a combined GDP of US $2.5 trillion of MERCOSUR group. So it is not one country's GDP, it is combined GDP of these nations. So what is the objective? Free trade and movement of goods, services, capital and people among the four member countries, to establish a common external tariff and a customs union, just like European Union, how they are creating these external tariff lines and customs union. In a similar way, MERCOSUR group is also try to promoting. So what are the partner countries? These were the countries that you need to remember. Observer countries are Mexico and New Zealand, full members, Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, Uruguay. So this time Brazil has comes into the picture because they have taken an agreement between India and MERCOSUR group. So what is the institutional structure? So each and every international organization has some institutional structure. Council of the Common Market, which is the highest decision making body, composed of foreign and economy ministers. So here both foreign and economic ministers are present. That is the highest decision making body under MERCOSUR. Common Market Group, which is the executive body responsible for implementing decisions. Whatever the decisions that were taken at a council, they have to be implemented by Common Market Group, CMG. It is an executive body. Next one, MERCOSUR Trade Commission, CCM. overseas trade policy and customs issues. So the trade policies or issues, are there any issues between this MERCOSUR group and any other regional group or any country, any individual country? Obviously that will be overseen by MERCOSUR Trade Commission. That is the third one. That is the institutional structure. So what is the significance of this MERCOSUR group? It is the fourth largest integrated market after European Union, North American Free Trading Agreement and Asian grouping. So if you look at market size, that is the fourth largest market after these three: European Union, NAFTA and Asian. It provides preferential trade benefits through agreements with countries like India, expanding market access for goods and services. So obviously it will provide some benefits by having agreements with countries like India. In this case, India and Brazil have gone for these agreements. And India MERCOSUR Preferential Trade Agreement, this was started way back in 2004 and operationalized since 2009. So this is the not new one, but under MERCOSUR group, India and Brazil have come to the agreements. That's why this topic was in news. It covers about 452 plus tariff lines with concessions from both sides. There are some 450 plus tariff lines or goods, in simple words, goods, and concessions also. So major traded items, what we are exporting to that countries and what we are importing from that group. India's exports: pharmaceuticals, obviously we know where the pharmaceuticals, chemicals, machinery and textiles, these were India's major exports. Edible oils, leather, iron ore and minerals, these were some of the imports from these countries. That is the India MERCOSUR Preferential Trade Agreement statistics and data. That is the second one. And coming to the third one, the future prospects of India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So if you look at closely, G7 countries, group of 7 countries are highly industrialized countries, commits to India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. So the West Asian conflict post 2023 and shifting global trade routes, just like Arctic passages. So whatever the choking points in the international navigation, so if there are any conflicts arising out of these regions, then obviously alternative routes should be developed. In a similar way, there is a one alternative route, Arctic passages. Being on Arctic passages, most of the goods were transported to the different parts of the world. That's why this India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor was seen in news, and which was very important for our examination perspective and at the same time our foreign trade policy. So what is IMEC? It was announced at G20 during 2023 summit after COVID-19, which aims to link India with Europe. How can you link India to Europe? Via Middle East, through a mix of rail connectivity, ports connectivity, digital connectivity and energy infrastructure. By integrating all these, India to Europe, the connectivity will be done through Middle East. It will span from India to Europe through India, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel and Greece. So these were the countries in between India to Europe. Indian ports especially will be connected to IMEC or Mundra port, Gujarat. So these were very important for your examination. Kandla or Deen Dayal port from Gujarat, Jawaharlal Nehru Port Trust from Navi, Mumbai. So these were the ports that were connected in this IMEC channel. It is a counter to China's Belt and Road Initiative. So what is China's Belt and Road Initiative? So China has actively developing this Belt and Road Initiative on sea route on mainlands to revive the earlier Silk Road of China, to connecting the world through this Silk Road. The corridor is estimated to cut the time from India to Europe by 40% and slash transit cost by 30%. So if we complete this project, India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, obviously we can expect the timing to reach the Europe will be reduced by 40% and transit cost will be reduced by 30%. So what are the challenges faced by India Middle East Economic Corridor? So in last classes also we had a deep discussions related to these conflicts, whatever the conflict zones of the world. So mostly you might remember one conflicting zone, West Asia. So with West Asia conflict, Gaza war and Israel-Arab tensions disrupt project timelines and trust also. So whenever project timelines are exceeding, obviously the cost associated with these projects will also skyrocketing. And at the same time, the governments, whatever the governments present in these countries, if they don't have any trust on the investments, then obviously it will delay the projects. Next one, security risk. Houthi attacks in the Red Sea raise maritime vulnerability. Frequent disruptions on maritime navigable routes. So whenever these maritime navigable routes are frequently attacked by non-state actors, then obviously the maritime vulnerability will be very high. The cost associated with these maritime vulnerabilities will also be borne by these countries. So that will further exacerbate the expenses on this project, IMEC. Next one, infrastructure gaps. If you look at multimodal links across Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel route, this is not completely under the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor. If you look at the map clearly. Next one, funding and implementation. So if you take in any large infrastructure projects, obviously you need a better investment and infrastructure spending. Institutional mechanisms should be supported. But if you look at dedicated financing framework like Asian Institute of Investment Banking and National Development Bank, there is an absence of these funding activities from these organizations. So obviously you can expect further delay. So if you have enough money supply, then obviously you can aggressively create infrastructure. So obviously here the absence of dedicated institutions like AIB or NDB, which will further face the challenges. What is the way forward for this issue, especially India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor? Adaptive routing. Explore alternative ports. So you should not depend only on these ports, what are the mentioned in the India, Middle East economic corridor, Jeddah, Dammam and Suez. So you can adapt another routes also to bypass conflict zones. Here mostly these conflict zones are Red Sea, which aligns with IMFO's Safety Routes 2025 protocol. So International Maritime Organization has given some safety routes or safety patches to transit the goods in 2025. According to that, you can align with IMO protocols. Multilateral financing. Obviously, you need to create a dedicated fund. Just like whenever any conference of parties were in news, especially under United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, each and every country, whenever any country is hosting, they will, at the first instances, what they will do, they will simply declare the fund. But these fund will be materialized or not, that's a later story. At least you, for the IMEC, you should create a dedicated fund under G20 India European Union partnership. So that will be look after for your financing needs. Next one, green corridor development. Link with European Union's Global Gateway Green Energy projects and India's National Green Hydrogen Mission. So you can develop a green corridor development with the different countries projects. Institutional mechanism. Formalize IMEC Secretariat under G20's Connectivity Agenda 2030. So you should have a institutional mechanism. So there is some decision making body, there is an executive body, what is the secretariat and where numbers are presenting, and what is the funding mechanism. These all should be present so that it will be very easy to complete the IMEC project.
Hello everyone. As you all know, Civil Services Prime Time is one of its kind initiative where we are teaching the students current affairs related to that particular subject one day at a time. అంటే ఒక వారంలో జరిగిన కరెంట్ అఫైర్స్ అన్ని ఒక సబ్జెక్ట్ కి సంబంధించి మేము ఒక రోజులో చెప్తున్నాం. సో దిస్ ఈజ్ ఆల్ బికాస్ ఆఫ్ ద రివర్స్ ఇంజనీరింగ్ టెక్నిక్. బికాస్ మీరు ప్రతి వీడియో చూసినట్టయితే ఎండ్ లో ప్రీవియస్ ఇయర్ క్వశ్చన్స్ ప్రిలిమ్స్ చేస్తున్నాము, అలాగే ఒక క్వశ్చన్ మెయిన్స్ చేస్తున్నాం. సో In order to get daily updates at 7 o'clock sharp as we are doing it, subscribe చేసుకోండి, అలాగే బెల్ కూడా క్లిక్ చేయండి, సో దట్ 7 o'clock కి మీకు ఇమీడియట్ గా నోటిఫికేషన్ వస్తుంది.
UNESCO Global Education Report. So mostly focusing upon Beijing Declaration of 1995. In 1995, under UN, the China has taken a platform for action 12 critical areas of concern, especially women. So it has taken in perspective of women. So there are some critical areas of concern: women and poverty, education and training of women, women and health, violence against women, women and armed conflict, women and the economy, women in power and decision making, institutional mechanisms for the advancement of women, human rights of women, women and the media, women and the environment, the culture. These were some of the 12 critical areas of concern which were projected by Beijing. That's why it is also known as Beijing Platform for Action. So if you look at UNESCO Global Education Report, which reveals that 133 million girls in the world outside of their school premises, despite 3 decades since Beijing Declaration. In 1995, the Beijing Declaration was adopted. Down the line, after 30 years, 133 million girls still remain outside of schools. That is the concern. So what is this Beijing Declaration? It was a resolution adopted by United Nations at the end of 4th World Conference on Women on 15th September 1995. The resolution adopted to promulgate a set of principles concerning the equality of men and women. Both men and women should be treated equally. So that is the major theme behind this agenda. It covers 12 critical matters of concern, areas of action considered to be present, and main obstacles in women empowerment. To achieve women empowerment, what were the different areas are where the different types of requirements or cooperation needed? That's were their 12 critical areas. So regional parity achievements. Central and South Asia have reached gender parity in secondary education. In secondary education itself, gender parity has achieved when Central and South Asian countries have taken. Sub-Saharan Africa and Oceania continues to lag due to poverty. So you can expect in African countries, because of poverty situations, the girl child education or opportunities are not equal with men's, right? Rural isolation and conflicts, because most of the countries are in conflicting zones. So you can simply expect that you should not have any parity, nothing but equality between men and women education. In countries like Mali and Guinea, fewer than 20% girls complete lower secondary education. Less than 20% of girls have completed their lower secondary education. So persistent quality gaps. Only 2/3 of countries have compulsory sexuality education at the primary level, and gender bias remains in textbooks and curricula, reinforcing stereotypes. So still some meta preference, how children are chosen by their parents. If it is a girl child, we don't want. If it is a boy child, some meta preference. In a similar way, there are some stereotypes are still there. Only 2/3 of countries have compulsory sexuality education, and gender bias remains in textbooks and curriculum. Still, men are very high and women are very subordinate to them. In a similar way, these textbooks are promoting. Leadership inequality. Although women form a majority in teaching professions in these countries, only 30% higher education leaders globally are women, revealing structural barriers in academic governance. Despite 30% of higher education leaders are women, still academic governance reveals a structural barriers. Economic and social significance. UNESCO emphasizes that educating girls is a societal investment directly linked to poverty reduction, labor participation, and inclusive economic growth. But most of the times, what we felt, it is not investment, it is expenses. That's where the difference arises. So if you take girls education as a societal investment, society's investments, then obviously you can lift them out of poverty. You can mostly make available for the labor force participation in the active promotion of your country's economic growth and inclusive economic growth. So irrespective of gender, whether male or female, caste, race, religion, irrespective of all these, you can include all them in your economic growth. So that is the inclusive economic growth. So under economic and social significance, if you ever invest in girl child education, obviously you can expect these outcomes. Example, the World Bank 2024 estimates that closing the gender education gap could boost global GDP by 15 to 30 trillion dollars. If you close the dispute, if you close the barriers between men and women in the world, then obviously you can boost global GDP by 15 to 30 trillion dollars. That's not a small number. By making some small changes, you can achieve this big number in GDP. Next one, Global Forest Resources Assessment, which was released by Food and Agriculture Organization, a specialized agency of United Nations. And this project report was released in Bali. So what are the key findings of this report? Over 90% of the world's forests are naturally regenerating. So 90% of the world's forests are naturally regenerating. So the global rate of deforestation continues to decline because different types of policies and the international treaties. So most of the times the countries are binding. That's why the global rate of deforestation continues to decline. The net loss of forest area has dropped by more than half compared to 1990s. Forests span more than 4 billion hectares worldwide, with nearly half located in tropical regions. So mostly tropical regions have the highest flora and fauna. Naturally regenerating forests occupy 3.83 billion hectares. Primary forest constitutes only 1/3 of a total global forest area. The rate of expansion of planted forest areas has slowed down globally. The world's total forest growing stock, biomass, and carbon reserves have shown overall increase. What are the key findings related to India? This is the important one. India's global ranking has climbed up from 9th position globally in total forest area, improving from 10th position. From 10th position to 9th position, it has reached in the previous assessment. This reflects India's consistent efforts in afforestation and sustainable forest management. Because of active India's afforestation policies or schemes, under the same time sustainable forest management practices, we have achieved this 9th position. Annual forest area gain. India has retained its 3rd position worldwide in annual forest area gain, demonstrating the country's steady progress in expanding green cover. The country is more actively promoting green cover. That's why the annual forest area gain. So more and more green areas are adding to the forest ecosystem. That's why it has been at 3rd position in the world. Government initiatives. The improvement in ranking is attributed to several national initiatives and programs focused on forest protection, afforestation, and community participation. Because of these government initiatives only, the rankings were possible. And key contributing campaigns like Paid Maa Ke Naam campaign has played a major role by inspiring citizens across India to actively participate in tree plantation and conservation efforts. That is one of the key contributing campaigns for our addition of net forest area. Community participation. The GFRA acknowledges growing public involvement in forest conservation, emphasizing that people's participation is crucial for achieving a greener and more sustainable future. So here, community driven. More and more people are engaging in active participation for the forest conservation. That's why it is possible for the more sustainable future with a greener energies. The improved ranking reinforces India's commitments to UN Sustainable Development Goals. These were very important, SDG 13 and SDG 15, which related to climate action and life on land. It also strengthens India's position as a global leader in sustainable forest management and climate resilience. That is the SDG goals. And last topic would be on debt, sovereign debt, especially the loans or finances that were taken by different countries. The new Sevilla Forum on Debt was launched at the 16th UNCTAD, United Nations Conference on Trade and Development. So the by name itself, we can assume that it will promote a trade in the developing countries to integrate with developed countries or global integration or global economies. So which was held in Geneva. So it is a Spanish-led multilateral forum supported by UNCTAD and UN Desha to promote fair, transparent and sustainable solutions to sovereign debt crisis. So if you look at Sri Lanka and Myanmar and Pakistan, even in earlier cases, there are some European countries are also under the severe financial crisis, and mostly different international organizations, international economic organizations came forward for the rescue of these nations, and they are providing some bailout packages also. So to promote fair and transparent and sustainable solutions to these type of sovereign debt crisis facing by any nations, the forum has developed. It was launched in Geneva as part of Sevilla Platform for Action following the outcomes of 4th International Conference of Financing for Development. So under the outcomes of FFD4. What was the aim? To sustain global dialogue on debt reforms, how to take these debt reforms, strengthen responsible borrowings and lending practices, and advance reforms in global debt architecture. So here they are mostly focusing on borrowing and lending practices. These borrowing and lending practices should be very responsible. You should not utilize these lending, these money, these finances on unproductive activities. That's where the difference has arrived, right? So if you take an example of India's case also, India has actually taken loans from different organizations or governments. So if they are investing in capital expenditure, capex projects, then obviously it will yield a long-term benefits to the economy. But let's suppose if they are investing in subsidies, providing subsidies and pensions and welfare schemes and unnecessary expenses, then what is the use of that finances that we are getting from different nations? In a similar way, there is one dedicated platform to control the responsible borrowing and lending practices and advance reforms in global debt architecture. What were the features? It is an inclusive forum involving governments. All governments are included in this. Creditors who are giving loans, they are also involved. Civil society organizations and experts, just like us as a economics and international faculty, tracks implementation of debt initiatives agreed in Sevilla, and provides technical supports for predictable and equitable debt management. So it will provide predictable and equitable debt management to the countries, which strengthens North-South cooperation on debt sustainability. Why North-South cooperation mostly? So mostly if you take a North countries or advanced countries or developed countries, from where we are getting these loans, so obviously North-South cooperation in this debt sustainability will be the highest priority for this forum. So that's why it will provide technical support for predictable and equitable debt management. So what is the significance? It acts as a bridge between borrowers and creditors, fostering long-term systematic reforms in global finance and ensuring fairer debt governance for developing economies. Especially they have been focusing on developing economies. So why? Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, to some extent, Myanmar. So these were countries that are actively knocking the doors of World Bank, IMF, and other financial institutions also. So that's why they have created a forum for the sustainable debt practices. So what is this UNCTA? It is a permanent intergovernmental body of United Nations that promotes integration of developing countries, South countries, into the global economy. Mostly South countries integration with North countries through trade practices, finance and sustainable development. So it was established in 1964, headquartered in Geneva, Switzerland. These are international organizations. These are frequently appeared in your UPSC prelims examination. And what is the aim? To help developing nations access the benefits of globalization fairly. What were the advancements or advantages that were out of these globalization practices that obviously you can benefit fairly? Strengthen economic resilience and support sustainable development goals, SDG goals. To achieve your SDG goals, the UNCTAD will help you out. So what are the functions? It provides research and policy analysis on trade, finance and investment, and also facilitate global consensus building on equitable trade policies. That is also one of the major function. Delivers technical assistance for capacity building and debt management practices in the countries. Monitors progress on financing for development under the 2030 agenda, SDG agenda, which will financing for development. What is the role of this UNCTAD, which acts as a key United Nations platform linking trade, investment, technology with inclusive and sustainable growth, which ensures the developing countries gain equitable participation in the global economy. There is a deep intention behind this UNCTAD is nothing but the developing countries gain equitable participation in the global economy. That is the major role played by UNCTAD. So this is the discussion related to your international relations weekly roundup, which was promoted by CivicCentre Civil Services Prime Time. We are conducting these topics regularly, so please have a look at these topics regularly so that you can have a better understanding of international relations, current affairs perspective, so that you can more focus on your prelims static points and at the same time dynamic aspects of international relations. So that is the discussion for today's class. Thank you for watching this IR topics. Have a nice day. We will see in next session. All the best.
CivicCentre IAS is offering Telangana Group 1 Prelims cum Mains classes as well as Andhra Pradesh Group 1 Prelims cum Mains classes in English medium for a period of 8 to 10 months. This also covers the complete NCERT textbooks and statewide textbooks. So what are you waiting for? Learn through reverse engineering technique today. Admissions are in progress. Join now. Visit our website. Thank you.